At this point, I have no doubt it's over 6 figures that I've spent just trying to get help and trying to get out of pain. And I never thought I would have had to face something like that at such a young age. I actually struggle to remember some of those moments because I think they're almost repressed from my memory because of how miserable it was.
I would wake up every morning, and every morning I was tired, which always confused me. I'm like, I have been in bed for 11 hours, and I would wake up and I would feel like death, and I would just get through the day. But it was getting worse.
Well, there was a wide variety of diagnoses that I was given from different doctors. One was post-concussion syndrome, something with anxiety, some anxiety disorder, chronic pain, different things. So I had an umbrella, I had a wide variety of diagnoses given to me, but I couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong.
Chronic disease is 92%, accounts for 92% of deaths in this country, and almost nothing is studied at NIH about the etiology of our chronic disease epidemic.
It's driving up healthcare costs to what I think $4.9 trillion. 40% of that's paid by the government, almost $2 trillion.
We got to treat this stuff so we can really, save costs from that angle, but just help people in terms of feeling better, right? And the quality of life.
It's the real pandemic. The idea that anybody doesn't have this is almost silly because everybody slips, falls, everybody has compromise in their nutrition, excess toxicity in the nervous system and in the environment that's affecting your nervous system. So growth and development patterns are affected for everybody from my generation, even before my generation, and it's just getting worse.
Sleep apnea is known to be comorbid with over 40 different really chronic conditions known to man. We're talking about everything from early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, fibromyalgia, cancer. There's very few chronic illnesses that are not either caused by sleep apnea or made worse by the condition.
OSA is the end stage of breathing disorder that is not addressed, and now we have a label. That's what it is. It's just a symptom. Pretty much like snoring itself.
And so to be able to find a way to address with a single broad stroke, how do we improve generally the health and wellness of an entire society, help that society to breathe and sleep better?
Yeah, my name's John Napoli. I'm here because I'm a patient of the Vivos Institute in Denver. They've been helping me to fix my body basically after this whole journey of chronic pain that I've been dealing with. My pain started in early 2022. At the time I was living in Tulum, Mexico. I was there for about 3 months and I was working remotely for a software company. I was training, also doing a lot of kickboxing training. I was actually training to do a fight, which was kind of a bucket list thing that I'd wanted to do since I was a kid. While I was living in Mexico, I started developing these really weird symptoms. And it kind of started at the base of my skull, where it was a headache unlike I'd ever had before. Just this immense pressure at the base of my skull. And my first thought was, this is from kickboxing. I must have taken a concussive blow to the head or some kind of trauma to my head from the kickboxing training I was doing and the sparring and all of that. So fast forward a couple months, I'd moved back to San Francisco, where I'm from originally. And I had imaging done of my head. I had all these different tests done. I saw a couple doctors. They didn't find anything. And they said I was most likely dealing with some sort of migraine.
What happens when you have a chronic illness, what that means is it's not going away. It's just going to stay there. And chronic illnesses in general, you can't really cure them. You can manage them and you can improve things. For example, if you use a CPAP machine, that doesn't cure the sleep apnea. What it does is it takes care of it that night. You stop using the equipment, the sleep apnea is back the next day, that kind of thing. So a chronic illness just keeps on going and isn't really cured.
First symptom for John Napoli, pain. And it was not just normal pain, it's debilitating pain. He could not hold a normal job. His life, sleep, every minute of his day was consumed by it. This gentleman is not even 30 years old yet, and he is so consumed and dysfunctionally in his body. They cannot move, can function, can go to the gym.
And my symptoms remained after I got back to San Francisco, and because I was given the green light to return to all my normal activities, that's what I did. And I didn't do any kickboxing in San Francisco. I kind of stopped that pursuit of trying to do a kickboxing bout, but I did return to powerlifting and weightlifting, which is a hobby that I've had for many years. And when my symptoms really started to spiral out of control, I had done a particularly heavy set of deadlifts. I did 575 pounds for 2 repetitions, which I had done before, but for some reason on this set, when I set down the weights after the second rep, I felt that something in my body had been jostled. And it wasn't like an acute injury. I didn't blow my back, like hurt my spine or hurt my neck or anything like that. I just felt like my nervous system was rattled when I set the weights down. And I stopped lifting for the rest of that day. And I remember for the rest of that week, I just felt terrible. I couldn't sleep. I had a feeling of exhaustion like I'd never had before. And about a week after that lift, I contracted COVID for the first time. I felt like I was having a heart attack.
It's hard to put life in perspective if your body isn't functioning properly. But the problem is, every single provider that had trying to get an attempt to address it was an epic fail. So a lot of times we're getting procedures to address the pain because we're desperate and it's causing more problem than solving. So when he came to me, and it was December of this year, just my heart dropped.
I'm Brad Jordan, and I live in California, but I'm here mainly because I've not been able to find answers for kind of the way that I am. It's painful and a lot of dysfunction, and I've never really been able to figure it out. Yeah, I grew up in the South, so grew up in like Alabama and Texas. Did graduate school at Arkansas, so PhD in biochemistry. Then I moved to California for a job, been there about 20 years. About 2 kids, marriage, all that kind of stuff. And then about 2020, I guess, whenever COVID started, I got into cycling, like a lot. I've always had athletic injuries, things like that. So knee injuries, ankle injuries, despite not being a high-level athlete. But I started cycling a lot during COVID and started getting this really bad low back pain that I didn't usually have. And then it just kind of snowballed, got worse. So I went to a few places to try to figure out what it was. Over time, things just kept getting worse, having more like hip and back pain and neck pain and things like that. So none of the traditional medical approaches worked for me. I had a number of back procedures, things like that to try to get at what they thought was a disc issue or something like that. But it turned out to be postural related.
Brad is a complex case where he's had multiple injuries, he's had compromises in his nervous system, so he's really failing in his adaptation. And that thing is understanding the adaptation is the nervous system. How much can you handle hits a level, a max level in the system, and then you start feeling having more and more symptoms and compromises.
Your average person, probably doesn't necessarily think about how each part of their body is feeling on a daily basis. But when you have a certain level of dysfunction and you feel that something is off, you become really analytical about your body, and then you start wondering why, and then you start looking into it, and the more you learn, the kind of more it blows your mind,
As a regulating system, a cruise ship is an enclosed vessel that goes out there, and it has crews, and it has passengers, chefs, all kinds of things that kind of work together. Now, could you say that if one part of the ship has a problem, it's only that isolated part of the ship? Like if there's a hole in the entire vessel, is it just an isolated problem in that part? No. If the electricity's got issues, the entire system would be brought down. It's the same thing with the human body. So when we have issues with the orthopedic alignments, tongue posture, nasal breathing, now the endocrine system, the digestive tract, the cardiovascular is involved. We're into the second layer of the health and homeostasis.
So we've been trying to reestablish core stability with them, which is foundational, meaning that you have to have the whole craniosacral system is based on the core or pelvis, which is musculoskeletal, but is also neurological, to stabilize and to calm down, so the whole nervous system will calm down, so that we can actually get into the whole airway, TMJ, head and neck position, which were chronic issues that he was having, that he's been searching for, that has not really been rectified to this point, which is what we're in process of doing now.
Yeah, I've definitely had to give up things that I love, because of it. I think that, being in a bad alignment or position for a long time and running my body into the ground with triathlons and sports and things like that, I indirectly attribute the, having to give all that up to this, right? Not just the injuries. The injuries happen because of this. And then for me, I think it's more just like being in a constant state of discomfort. The only time I'm relatively comfortable is when I'm asleep.
If we catch them early, removing the reasons for compensation as early as we can, they're not going to spend the rest of their adulthood chasing the symptoms and grinding their bodies. The difference is not just managing the disease, but addressing it so we can make life more enjoyable, treating a lot of chronic conditions that are boiling down to not being able to breathe and sleep so that they're not sick. This is not just about obstructive sleep apnea and snoring, it's about chronic diseases.
Chronic diseases might lead to increased mortality, more morbidity in terms of more hospitalizations, more impairments in function, more hospital resource utilization, poor quality of life. We want to prevent chronic diseases. And one of those chronic diseases is actually obstructive sleep apnea.
No one takes sleep apnea serious. They laugh when I say I have that problem. Haha, it's funny. That is a serious problem. People with sleep apnea get to say that we fight death every night. I'm this close to dying, and I win every time I wake up a survivor.
Sleep apnea. I have sleep apnea. And do you know about this?
Yeah.
Do you snore?
I have a mouthpiece.
You're like 50% more likely to have car accidents if you have sleep apnea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It'll up your job. It'll won't get hard-ons. It'll ruin everything.
Some people, it's really bad too. And it goes on for years and years and years. They don't even know about it.
Fatigue caused by sleep apnea may have been a factor in September's deadly train crash in Hoboken. CBS 2's Tony Aiello has more.
When I first heard about this accident, I thought it was likely to be a falling asleep accident.
Sleep expert Stephen Feinsilver, not surprised by the latest involving the engineer in the Hoboken train crash.
I don't snore. Don't be embarrassed. Obstructive sleep apnea is serious. Every time your airway closes down and you wake up fighting for breath, it puts tremendous strain on your heart. Dr. Schreck is absolutely right in prescribing this for you.
For the first few years of, after my article came out about sleep, it wasn't even called sleep apnea at that time. The name sleep apnea didn't really appear until about 1976, obstructive apnea. It was thought to be exquisitely rare. exquisitely rare. And it continued to be thought of as exquisitely rare because people simply didn't recognize that the main symptom, being very, very sleepy, had an important cause, and you can investigate.
The problem arises from your airway collapsing multiple times during the night. So what it does is it causes you to work harder to breathe. It may lead to sleep fragmentation. It may lead to oxygen levels dropping. It disrupts your sleep altogether.
And the stopping breathing is called apnea. You are not breathing. When you stop breathing, all sorts of things happen. Your blood oxygen drops, your blood pressure goes up, and what ends up happening is, in response to that, your body doesn't want to die, right? So what it does is it basically goes into sort of a sympathetic overdrive. Your sympathetic nervous system sort of goes into overdrive. The heart rate goes up, the blood pressure goes up, rouses the brain, and that opens up the airway. And so that's what happens with each episode. And that cycle can go on hundreds of times a night. Hundreds of times a night. The next morning, the person is sleepy because they haven't had normal sleep. But there are chronic effects of sleep apnea. High blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stroke. So there are all these other things that happen. Cardiac arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation is very, very common in sleep apnea. So it's bad both acutely and chronically.
Our brain wasn't meant to keep us thriving through life. It was meant to scan the environment for safety. And when that safety is not perceived and established, the brain will make sure that that happens, because why would it matter if I don't make it to the next second what my life is going to look like 20 years down the road? When brain does not perceive safety, if in doubt, inflame, which means you activate the 911 code. What happens? The firefighter shows up, the fire truck shows up, the police shows up, right? That's inflammation. When bodies perceive of safety is in danger, the body goes into the cycle of inflammation and cortisol production. Now imagine if every night the firefighter shows up and hose down your house. Just imagine that. You're not going to lose your house to the fire. You're going to lose your house to the damage. That's inflammation.
Not breathing during sleep can lead to a lot of terrible things. And one of the things it can lead to is death, okay? If you don't breathe long enough, you're either going to die or your brain is going to suffer a great insult. But it's not simply the not breathing that night that's the problem.
There's a reason we call it restorative deep sleep, because the biggest thing is that you get all the biochemical processes that take place during the day, hormonal changes, your adenosine levels change, right? So ATP gets broken down, all that gets restored during deep sleep, right? So if you don't get deep sleep, then you're not getting that hormonal balance. You're not getting that zest that you're going to need to be awake and functioning and restored and energetic during the day.
It's been considered the fifth vital sign. So we talk, when people come into the office, you want to measure their heart rate, their blood pressure, the oxygen level. Now, pain assessment is one of those vital signs you want to take. And I think sleep should be one of those vital signs. We should assess people's sleep quality. If
you don't get that, guess what happens? You get diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. You get diagnosed with depression. You get diagnosed with ADHD. Right? And these are the diagnoses that are easy to make because we're thinking about outward symptoms, but we're not thinking about what needs to take place during that deep sleep, which is restorative for all those processes in our brain, in our body.
Well, worldwide, we know that there's over 1 billion people that have a sleep and breathing disorder. And the most damaging and most dangerous form of a breathing and sleep disorder is the obstructive sleep apnea. And so we're talking about 70 million Americans roughly that have this condition, plus children. So there's about 10 million children, so it's 70 million adults. And you know, these numbers keep going up. The latest.
It's never normal for a child to stop breathing a lot during sleep. It's not normal for a child to be snoring and stopping breathing during sleep. It needs to be evaluated.
I looked at some statistics just recently that showed that in the children population, the pediatric population, that where a decade ago there was a prevalence of around 7 to 9%, it's now up to 20%.
My name is Stephen Mackay. I'm from Northern Ireland and I'm 30 years of age. So I remember when I was 12 years old and I had fixed orthodontia, for the very first time I had clicking in my jaw, and I wondered what it was, but I couldn't find any resources on it to figure out a way to fix it. I just thought it was normal.
So in a child, there are two things to really worry about when one is thinking about or treating or diagnosing sleep apnea. One is that there's an effect on the brain, cognition, and performance during the daytime. If you don't sleep well, your brain doesn't work well. You don't learn as well. And if you don't learn as well when you're young, that's going to have an effect on the rest of your life. I mean, I've had patients who are 12 years old who had sleep apnea who dropped out of school because they were sleepy and falling asleep in class.
I do remember in 5th grade, which interestingly was around the time that I had braces on my teeth, is when my teacher told me to stay after school. And my mom came in and the teacher was like, hey, John's on a different page than the rest of the class.
And it seemed to me like it was a common problem amongst many people. So at the time, I just let it go. I didn't do any research on how to fix it.
It impedes the development of our children, their growth, their maturity, their ability to thrive, and it impedes families.
The majority of people don't really know, or they're not really aware that they have a sleep issue, but they're suffering from those symptoms. And they may not even register as fully apneic. They are not children. I mean, 18 to 20 years old are starting to feel like, I'm not my best self. I'm only 18 years old. They have pain that they don't know where it's coming from, because it's taxing to keep your head outside of its center of balance.
I struggled since my early teenage years with chronic back pain. I used to be a rower, so I was quite good at rowing, and I really struggled with training and exercise.
As I got older into my teenage years, like I started developing pretty bad anxiety, seemingly out of nowhere, probably around my junior year of high school. That continued into like my sophomore year of college. And to manage that, I didn't even really see a psychiatrist till I believe I was going into my freshman year of college. And he put me on Lexapro to kind of calm down my anxiety. I was also put on Prozac, which was, I think it's like an antipsychotic, if I'm not mistaken. And then I was also taking Adderall to kind of balance out the depressants that I was on. So I was on this cocktail of pharmaceuticals as a freshman in college.
And they're getting those symptomatology when we test them for sleep, and their bodies are in fight or flight. But they're not necessarily registering with higher metrics of AHI. So we say, well, you're mild, just go home and come back when you're severe. The problem with that is they're suffering from an upper airway resistance, a collapsible airway, and a body that's in shambles to keep those numbers high. By the time their numbers drop, there's a lot more damage to the body already done, neurologically and orthopedically, if not also physiologically, that it's going to take a lot more to treat.
I had chronic back stiffness, and it led to neck stiffness eventually, TMJ pain, and really just poor performance when it came to sports. I had to try probably twice as hard as my peers to make the teams and perform well.
These are conditions that affect our entire society at some level.
And it's very, very common.
Good night.
Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Which isn't as funny as it used to be, because I had this kid in my class, and it was, whoa.
If this is a turnoff, I could do without it.
So right now, the primary way, and probably the best way we can treat sleep apnea is with a CPAP machine, or a positive airway pressure machine. So the CPAP machine is a mask that's connected with a hose to a small machine with a motor that generates pressure that's delivered to the airway, and it allows the airway to balloon open and stay open, so it doesn't collapse during the night.
My first contact with sleep apnea, and it might even be the first case that was reported in North America, was when I was a medical resident. I had a patient who came into the hospital who was overweight, and he came in because he was having seizures during sleep. He was brought into the hospital. At that time, I didn't know anything about sleep. I was a medical resident, and nobody thought about sleep as being potentially dangerous. So at that time, we didn't know what to do with this guy, and looking at him and looking at the fact that he had an obstruction, I thought, well, maybe we need to relieve this obstruction somehow. And I went to my attending physician, who was, again, a brilliant guy, and I said, we need to do a tracheostomy here to relieve this patient's obstruction. We did a tracheostomy. That was 1973, 1974. CPAP was not described until 1981. So during that period, we were doing tracheostomies in patients who had severe sleep apnea. And the notion of CPAP was discovered by a researcher who at the time was in Toronto. Then he moved to Australia, Colin Sullivan. And Colin Sullivan initially had worked in dogs, then he switched to people, went to Australia, and basically discovered CPAP. And he published it in an article in Lancet, wonderful article.
Standard of care has always been CPAP.
Hey, what's with the mask? It's for my sleep apnea.
You have difficulty breathing while you sleep?
I wouldn't know. I'm asleep.
But the problem with all those treatments are that they're just treating their Band-Aid, like Mike said earlier. People are not compliant with CPAP. I mean, you know, I told you my own story, but I can tell you patient after patient after patient, right? It was still less than a 50% compliance rate out there, right? And so those CPAP machines wind up in the closet, in the backyard, in the junkyard, on eBay.
And what's interesting about that is that he's still amazed that all of these decades later, CPAP is still the treatment of choice. Like there's got to be something better in his mind, but we may be getting there very, very soon.
I'm Janice Craig. I am from Brimfield, Colorado. I was a homeschool mom and a stay-at-home mom, and you really need patience. And you can't be kind of, you're so tired. And then sometimes your kids, there are days that they are so challenging. And it was like trying, you don't want to snap at them. You don't want their entire childhood to be the tired, stressed out, snapping mom who, blows up over tiny little things. So I was trying to really, maintain that, which I think I did a pretty decent job of, but it took everything that I had.
When a parent has obstructive sleep apnea and they themselves are not operating at full strength, when they have not slept for days or weeks or months or years, and they're on edge and their temperament is not ideal, just relationship-wise, I think it's a huge thing. And then we know that when we fix obstructive sleep apnea, all these comorbidities that I've talked about, they decline in the population.
Janice Craig Janice has a special place in my heart because her story is so profound. She volunteered and tell me about her birth trauma. She volunteered to tell me about her locked jaw and that she's been looking for the right answers. Never been able to sleep a full night of sleep or getting a full restful sleep ever. And she was in my chair saying, I have done my research. It has everything to do with my mouth and I don't know what to do with it. I could hear the desperation in her voice. And at age 50, that's when it caught up with her that I got to do something about it.
So I guess you could say it all started, we went on a hike with our next door neighbors, and hiking is something I grew up doing and I loved hiking, but I was pretty heavy by that point. And it was one of the hardest hikes I'd ever done. Like just the exertion going up the hill, I had to keep stopping. I was having a lot of trouble breathing. We got to the top and of course we took the little picture, like, oh, let's get a picture. It was torture. And it was a couple days later, we dropped by to say hi to the neighbors and they had all of our hiking photos revolving through on this digital frame. And I went over to, oh yeah, this is the hike that we took, and the picture on the top of the mountain came up. And I guess you know that you've gained weight and you know that you're heavy, but then sometimes you don't. You put it to the back of your mind, you're not really paying attention. And I remember looking at that picture, being shocked, like horrified. I'm like, wait, is it really that bad? Has it really gotten that bad? And I went home and cried. And then I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not living like this anymore. That was Thanksgiving weekend of 2021. And that Sunday was the day that I started. And within 10 months had dropped 65 pounds. And then after that weight loss, because I was looking so much better, at least I fit in clothes a lot better, I was like, well, maybe we can deal with these slightly crooked teeth. And so I was in for one of my cleanings and asked the dentist, and that's when she was like, you have bigger problems than crooked teeth.
But really though, the one thing that with Janice got her even to me was the fact that she noticed her teeth are getting crooked again. She already had braces. Why are my teeth going back to crooked? So she consulted with one of my doctors that does consult with me on airway, and the dentist said, you have a breathing and a sleep issue, and that's related to your crooked teeth. Obviously, it's brand new to hear, but she decided to pursue that nevertheless, and she did a sleep test, and lo and behold, poor quality sleep. And she knew that all along, but puzzled about how it's even related to my mouth, how it's even related to my teeth.
She was like, actually, I think we should probably do a sleep study. I think you have sleep apnea. I'm like, that's not why I'm here. But decided I would go ahead and do the sleep study because I was tired all the time. And the sleep study came back. I was averaging 2 hours and 49 minutes of sleep a night. We did the test for 3 days in a row. And she referred me to Bahar. She's like, I think you need to go see this lady that I know.
So when I looked at her, the first thing that I said is, there is not a single dental appliance that's going to help you at this point because your body needs to be freed up first.
And my options were to try Vivos or to go onto a CPAP, and there was no way that I was going to do a CPAP. So I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot. And it's funny, the first time I met Bahar, she's like, oh, it'll change this and you'll look so much younger. And I'm like, I really don't care. I'm like, is there sleep involved? Because if you can get me to sleep, I will do it. And that was almost 2 years ago.
So we worked for about 6 months with a chiropractor addressing her spine. And just within first few months, her body is already coming alive. So let me explain what happened in a case like this. Because if your jawbone and your pelvis are both blocked and out of alignment, there's a mechanism that supplies oxygen to the brain and removes toxicity from the brain. And if there's any reason why the system is not fully functioning, locked up cranial bones is one of them, imbalance in the pelvis is another one, this fluid would not function properly. the irrigation system around the brain, which is supposed to set the proper pH for function of the brain, is not working. Oxygen is not getting delivered. Metabolic wastes are not being removed.
One of the interesting things for me is I thought that I didn't dream. I'm like, yeah, I used to dream when I was little, but I don't really dream. And I started with the pod appliance, and I would say like 2 or 3 weeks later, every night I started having really vivid dreams. Sorry, I think the hormones, I'm a crier. And I thought, oh my goodness, I must be sleeping because I'm finally dreaming. And then when I would wake up in those mornings, it wasn't that same like death warmed over feeling. Like I woke up and I'm like, oh, I still wasn't 100% better, but I could definitely do more, get more accomplished in the day. And I had more patience and resilience with people. I could put up with a little bit more.
In the mouth. That's literally what it is. Just keep landing on it. So now everything that you're doing, I'm excited to see the next.
Stephen found out about me through a podcast I did with another chiropractor, and he mentioned how I address the body and the mouth simultaneously. So he reached out to me and wanted to consult with me over the Zoom. And when I look at the CBCT of his head, the first thing that I noticed is how many malalignment I noticed around his skull. Every time that he swallowed and walked, his mouth being so uneven was exacerbating it. Basically, he was locked up in his body.
It ended up being structural issues caused by faulty orthodontic procedures that I went through in my teenage years, and it led to structural weakness in my body, and my nervous system just fell apart, really.
Sometimes sleep apnea is caused by anatomical factors, so the shape of your jaw, your bony structures. So anything that can really block the airway, either from an anatomical standpoint or from a functional standpoint.
What I noticed was the way that his head was shifted and the way his mouth was shifted and the way he was walking through space was all malaligned. More importantly, his tongue wasn't able to assume the proper posture at the roof of his mouth. So that becomes a breathing dysfunction.
I never really got to the root cause of the issue until a dentist gave me a splint for my teeth. And once I started wearing the splint, my neck pain and my back pain changed, and I knew that there could have been an oral component here with the mouth and the teeth that was affecting my well-being.
So the fact is, our lower jaw is literally the mirror of our feet, except they're conjoined. The two mandibles are conjoined. And our temporal bones, which is the bone that holds our jaw joint, is literally the reflection, is equivalent of our hip bones. So if our hip bones are off, so is our temporal bones. If temporal bones are off, they're reflecting that. And the way people are shifting and moving, if they have limitation of moving into this hip, they have limitation of moving in this jaw joint, which is why their midlines are off. So the fact that his midlines are coming to close tells me that his system is lining up and opens up the spaces between his mouth and his neck, because mouth and neck are two sides of the same coin. We didn't have teeth when we were born. Did everybody think about that?
One thing is for sure, we don't have teeth at birth. They are not there when we are born. As our jaws are still there and they are growing, they're extension of our head and extension of our body, the position of the teeth are not decided yet until we stand up. So whatever malposition that these bones are, that's where the teeth are going to come in. As I always say, teeth are children in the family. They don't choose their family, they come into the family. So when I look at malocclusion, what I do see is malaligned body. And when I look at the teeth that are now completely erupted in that position, and dentists and orthodontists have changed their position, they're no longer representing the system that brought them into eruption in the first place. So to be able to give him a chance, we had to separate the teeth and allow the body to organize itself. And now we're giving him the proper reference that would be in congruence with his pelvis, with his sacrum, the bottom of his spine, his diaphragm, and more important, the way his head is supported on top of his spine. So in that position, the tongue now, with 5 nerves that's attached to it, can function to guide him through space for every swallow, for breathing, and within a month, almost 100% of his symptoms resolved, because his body is no longer trying to figure it out, because his mouth is working with his feet. His pelvis is able to orient him through three-dimensional space.
So this is where the oral appliances come into play. But we've learned to connect these dots and figure out that if we can move and manipulate some of these tissues in the relative position of cranial bones, of our pelvis, of other bones throughout our spinal column, we can actually affect a person's ability to breathe.
Well, one of the things that gives me a lot of optimism is the fact that society is becoming much more aware about the importance of sleep. And a lot of people are prioritizing their sleep. In other words, sleep is important, and in order for me to function properly the next day, for the next year, the next decade, I need to have normal sleep.
The thing I like about Vivos is they're trying to find a permanent solution to these structural issues that affect your sleep, and that's what I like so much about them. They're always moving forward with their development.
I can feel it as such a improvement in only 5 weeks. I probably feel 30% better than I did 5 weeks ago. So I can't wait to see how I feel another 5 weeks from now. If you zoom out far enough and look at a chart of my healing journey, I am now trending upward and to the right. And that's the most important thing.
It's the first time I've started thinking about, what do I get to do now? Like, my kids have grown up and I raised them and they've left the house. But I have enough where I'm like, I could be doing something. Like, what little part of the world will I go and try and fix? I was so busy surviving, that was not even a thought. Like, I didn't have the bandwidth to do that. I'm like, I'm trying to get through my day. And now I can get through the day, and I'm like, I could do more.
And that's the goal, to be available. And that's a goal of our company, is to just have that outreach and to be able to say, hey, you know what? We can get you in for an appointment same day, following day. We can get your sleep test done like that. And you don't have to wait months and months and months, where a lot of people just fall off the tracks, right? So I would close with that, saying that now the availability is there and we're looking forward to it.
Hope is not a CPAP machine. That is, when somebody is given a CPAP machine as their remedy for this condition, they feel hopeless. They don't feel hope. And so our goal is to give and restore hope to patients that suffer from obstructive sleep apnea.
I've gained a lot of wisdom from this experience, and the best thing for me is, if you suffer a little bit in life and you fix the problem, how it feels on the other side of that is amazing. And if you're going through dark times and you're going through dark days where you have issues with your health, better days are ahead, and you will reap what you sow in those dark days. So how it feels to overcome your health issues and find the answers that you've been looking for a long time is absolutely worth the suffering.